Welcome back to part 2 of the Dynamic Lion. Now we're going to add the top hairs onto our lion on the right side, or the cool side of the lion's face, the side that's in shadow. So I'm using a NuPastel number 245 light turquoise blue. I'm going to start with that and then see what other colors I could add on top of that. So I'm making sure I just use the edge, and I'm drawing little fine hairs. Making sure that they go in the direction that they grow. Now I've put a few of the same blue hairs under the eye. Right there I added a little more of the red violet, and now I'm using 246 rose pink. It's a bright pink to add and pull the hairs out from the side of the lion's mane, or from the side of his face into his mane. Here again I'm using the edge of the stick, just putting them in one by one. It's a beautiful color, very bright. Now here I'm taking my black and putting in a few dark hairs using the tip. And now I'm using the edge of the 318.7 Carmine, which works well too. So I want to add some lighter pink hairs, and for that I'm using 286 Madder Pink. I'm not using the point, I'm using the edge. I've pulled the paper off down around the bottom, and I'm using that to put in these lighter hairs. Make sure your hairs go in the direction that they grow. Now to brighten up these hairs just a little bit, I want a little bit brighter blue. So I'm using my 211 white NuPastel on its edge, and if I put the white over the blue, you can see it makes it a little bit brighter. Again, I'm adding in some darker hair with the edge of my black NuPastel. And now I'm using the light pink again, the Madder Pink, the 286. I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you. So now I've sped this up a little bit, but I'm using the same colors to add the hair to the face. The rose pink, the blue, and the white. Just making sure that I go in the direction that the hair grows. And some of the hairs I'm making a little longer now, pulling them out into the background. And we're back in normal time now, and you can see me do this in real time. Still using the pink, pulling out the hairs. And now I'm using some red violet, which is 234 NuPastel. That shows up quite nicely as well. Now I've changed my camera angle a little bit and zoomed out I'm using the turquoise again, which is 245 New Pastel. And I'm just taking my time and adding long, curvy strokes to my painting. Now I'm back to a close-up view. I'm putting pink into the top of the lion's head over his eye. And I'm going to use my white over the pink. You can see this is a really good example of the white is making the pink brighter. It picks up the color underneath. And now I've switched back to the turquoise, which is number 245. Now I need to add a little darker color to this area above the eye and to the right. It's not quite dark enough, so this is my 508.5 Rembrandt. I'm putting that down, darkening that color, and I'm going to probably add a little black over that. That's the 700.5 to get it really dark in that corner. A little more blue. Now I'm back to adding pink, drawing it out over the blue that we just applied. And here I'm adding the light pink with the 286. So I'm using the same colors and just applying them in different areas, making sure my direction is correct. That's the most important thing. So have a good time and just put in these colors. And then when it's need a little bit more darkness in there, this actually is 305 Spruce Blue that I'm adding. And this is a little piece that's broken off that I can push down and really get it to cover a larger area than just using the point. Here I added a little red violet, just continuing to make that darker and vary the colors. And now I've actually switched to my 229 black. You can see how it shows up so much darker on top of the blues. And pulling out those little black hairs from around the eye. That just makes it all fit together and helps that eye to be part of the lion's face. So I've sped this section up and I'm continuing to add the same colors. The pink, which is the 246 Rose Pink, or the 306 Orchid Pink, whichever one you like and shows up the best. The 245 Light Turquoise, the 211 White, and adding a little black in between to get darker areas, whatever's necessary. So now in this section, I'm adding some bright hairs that are coming in a different direction. They're from the top of his mane as it flops over. And so I'm adding those with the pink. That looks nice. It stops the eye from traveling out of the picture too, which is good. And we're going to add some light pink to that as well with the 286. And that's kind of the highlight color. So now I'm in the center of his forehead and I'm adding some pink to this area. Now as we're moving across the lion to the other side, we're darkening that area up at the top that's going to be the cropped edge of our painting. I was using the dark blue, the 508.5, and I'm also using the 700.5 to darken that area. And I'm going to add a little bit of red violet as well. Just going around the entire edge of the lion. Still adding a few black hairs here and there. continue adding strands of hair with the different colors that we've been using until it looks right to you. I want it a little brighter, so I'm going to add a little more white. Remember to use a very soft touch. Now we're going to work on this area. I'm calling it his muzzle, under his nose. So I'm using my bright pink Rembrandt 318.7 Carmine, and I'm adding pink to the outside edge. Now I'm going to darken the holes where his whiskers come from with 305 Spruce Blue, and over top of that I'm going to use, and that's NuPastel, I'm going to use NuPastel 346 Bordeaux and a little red violet to kind of stay with the theme of our dark areas. So I'm not making them really individual holes, I'm making it a dark area. Now I've sped this up a little bit for you while I finish up this darkening of the area that the whiskers are going to come out. And while I was doing that, I decided that I didn't have that area shaped just right. So I'm taking the blue and the black and I'm going to reshape the muzzle on the right side just a little bit. It's one of the beauties of pastel. You can just go in and fix stuff if it's not exactly right. Now we're back in real time, and I'm using my 286 Madder Pink to add little short hairs around the nostril and on the muzzle area, on the outside of the muzzle area. So on the far right side is where we're going to use the pink. And now I've switched from Madder Pink to 246 Rose Pink. Now I'm switching back to the Madder Pink. I think that did better. It shows up better. You can't really see the hairs that I drew in with the darker pink. So I'm just going to use the Madder Pink to put those in. I'm using the edge of the stick of the Madder Pink, doing short little hairs, taking my time, doing them in the direction that the fur grows. Just short little hairs. Now on the inside of the muzzle, towards the nose and the mouth, working on the towards the left side, I'm using the 245 light turquoise and also the 235 light blue to add the little hairs. I like both of those, but I think the light blue is probably a better choice here instead of the turquoise. And I'm going to use my white charcoal pencil to see about brightening a few of those hairs in there, how that works. Sometimes I use the white pencil, sometimes I use the white NuPastel. And now I have my black NuPastel, and I'm using it to pull down some little black hairs into the muzzle from the nose. And I'm going to go back and add some brighter white over top of that blue to brighten it up. But the black, by pulling those black hairs down from the nose, that helps the nose to blend better with the muzzle, and it just makes for a nicer look. So I'm going to go back and add a little more black, and now a little more white. I'm going to speed this section up a little bit and just continuing to finish off the muzzle by using the 235 light blue, the 286 pink matter, and also the 211 white. Now I'm back in real time, and I'm using my black 229 NuPastel, and I'm adding some darks. I'm using the tip to add some darks. I can also use the base, and I'm going to continue to add hairs with the 245 turquoise, and also with the bright pink. This is the rose pink, which is 246. It looks beautiful mixed in with some of the blue. And just add as many hairs as you want. Now I'm using the edge of the Rembrandt 570.5 Phthalo Blue to add a few hair. You can use the Rembrandts on their edges just like you do the NuPastels. They're a little softer, but you can use them. And now I'm going to use that 570.5 to add blue, and also some black with 700.5 Rembrandt to make it darker right next to the lion's beard. I'm using a little bit of NuPastel black to darken that area as well. I'm continuing to use the black to kind of shape the beard. Now I'm going to darken in the center of the beard with blue. Just shaping that up and adding some shadows. Now I'm going to add the whiskers. So I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add the whiskers. Now what works really well is if you take your pencil and sand it on one side and then flip it over and sand the next side and make it kind of a chisel shape, and you can get a better line. Now what you saw me do right there was I used a 9B graphite pencil to knock off a little bit of white charcoal that had gotten on the muzzle, and I didn't want it where it was, so I used my pencil to get rid of it. So that's a good tip for you. I've finished the whiskers, and now I'm going to work on this beard. So I'm using my 235 NuPastel light blue to add hair into the beard on the right side more than anywhere else at this point. And then I'm going to use some pink also. So this is the 286 Matter Pink. We're using the same colors that we used on the right side of the lion's face. We're adding those into that beard. And now I'm adding some 211 white over top to brighten that up. And I'm using 229 black as needed to draw black hairs in to shape up that beard till I get it to be just the shape I want. I don't want it too big. So by using the black, I can correct the shape, make it a little smaller in this case. Now I'm using black to add a few dark hairs right at where it meets the mouth. Now as we move over to the left side of the beard, which is going to be the warm side of our lion, I'm using 276 buff to add the light hairs on that side. Now to add some warm shadows into this side, I am using a 263 NuPastel Indian Red to put some warm shadows into that part of the beard. And you can also see me using the 411.5 Rembrandt to add some warm in that area as well. I continue to use the 276 buff to add light hairs and also the 263 Indian Red to add some warmer shadows as necessary into that beard area. I'm adding a little white 211 to make some of the hairs a bit brighter. So I'm working back and forth between the black, the white, and the 276 till I get just a combination of colors that I want. Now I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add a few hairs to the beard. I think that looks really nice. Make sure your pencil is sharp. Sharpen it like a chisel, like I discussed before, and that'll help you get some nice lines. I'm working on the warm side of the lion now, and I'm increasing the value. I'm using a 411.5 on the nose and on the side of the muzzle to add some deeper values. I'm also using 263 Indian Red. You'll see me using that. It's about the same color as the 411. It's just a little smaller and easier to get in some of the smaller places. We already used our Rust NuPastel, which is number 343, around the eyes and in some other places. And we may use that again. But we want to get darker, warmer color on the lion's face. Now in the center, where the shadow is, I'm using the 305 Spruce Blue. Not really wanting to put hairs here, but I want to put a deeper value. So I'm using the 305 mostly on the right side of the lion's nose, which is in shadow. Over that, I'm putting the 346 NuPastel Bordeaux, which is a red-violet color, which is darkening that and adding interest to that shadow. I'm also adding some Prussian blue, the 508.5 Rembrandt, using the shorter end. And this is Cordovan, 353 Cordovan brown, which is a brown madder color. It's kind of a purpley brown, and I'm using that in the shadow areas too. It's adding some interest. So I'm continuing to deepen the shadows with the Cordovan, just light touch, just wiggling my pastel around. I'm not making hairs, I'm just adding color. And now I'm adding a little black to that, making things just a little bit darker in value. Take your time with this and make the edges soft. Now up in the corner of his eye, I'm using 305 Spruce Blue, and I'm doing the same thing. So I'm making the shadow a little bit darker. Here's the Cordovan, 353. I'm coming down this line on the side of his nose, and I'm shaping his nose. And I'm using my reference photo. I'm always following my reference photo. This is 263 Indian Red. So it's a lighter value than the Cordovan. But I'm adding some middle tones to this area. We're building depth, and we're making that 3D quality that we want in our work. And this is the Cordovan 353. Now after using the Cordovan, I'm going over that with the 411.5 Rembrandt, and that's kind of smoothing those colors together. And we're adding that beautiful red tone, burnt sienna, that goes so well with this project. I'm still deepening color with the Cordovan. Now see, by going back over the black with it, it tones down the black. The black isn't screaming black because there's additional color there. That looks great. I'm adding some red violet now. This is my little piece of red violet. You could use Bordeaux as well. And add these colors into the shadows. That red violet ties in to the colors that we used on the right side of the lion, and I think it works really well, giving interest to the areas that are just burnt sienna. And I'm putting the 508.5 Prussian blue over it to kind of darken the area. But you can see that it doesn't look as blue on the side of the face as it does in other areas on our lion. I don't want it to scream blue. So I'm using very light touch here. I sped this section up a little bit. I'm continuing to use the Cordovan to add shadows down around the base of the lion's face. I'm using a little bit of the 411.5 burnt sienna too in places that I forgot to. Now I'm back here in real time, and I'm using my black NuPastel to add the whisker holes on the left side of the lion. Now I'm using the Cordovan 353 NuPastel to soften the black on the left side. And I'm just kind of zigzagging my way across it to kind of blend it together, because we want this side to be warm. I'm adding a little more 411.5 here, getting it a little darker and a little redder. And this is the Cordovan. I'm adding some shadows on the side of that muzzle. Now using my 276 NuPastel on the sharp edge, I'm going to add these little tiny hairs around the nostril of his nose. I'm taking my time, being very careful with this. Just short little strokes going in the direction that the hair grows. As I move around towards the center of the nose, I'm going to change the 276 and use the 235 blue, which is cooler. And I'm going to use this to continue across. Now using the 276, and I'm using very, very light pressure. You can see the hairs don't show up as strongly as they did around the nostril. I'm adding a few hairs in the center of the nose. I don't want the hairs in this area to be too dominant, so I'm just lightly stroking back and forth, adding the hairs to give the impression of hair without adding too many. I'm going to switch to my pink now, the 246 Rose, and add a few hairs in the cooler side of the nose. And a little bit of black where it needs a little more darkness and definition. Here I'm using a little 233 raw sienna, which is a good color, seeing how it shows up. And I've switched to the Rembrandt 231.5. That adds a little medium value hair. You can see they're not as prominent. And now I've switched back to 353 Cordovan to darken this area. I'm using the 353 to add more shadow areas to this side of the face before adding the lighter hairs. As always, let your picture, your painting at this point kind of tell you what to do. If yours is dark enough, you don't need to add more color. But mine needed to be a little darker. I know that the lighter hairs are not going to show up if I don't go darker. A little more 411.5 here and there, just adding a little more red tone. Now using the 276, I'm going to add some light hairs. Again, I know I say it often, but make sure that your strokes go in the direction the fur grows. Now I'm using this 233 raw sienna, the mid-tone. I like this, so you can use this on the edge, which I like quite a bit. That is a good color that kind of bridges the gap. Or you can use the edge of your 231.5 Rembrandt. If you decide to use the Rembrandt, just sand the short, small end on your block to get a sharp edge. And then I'm going over that with the 276. I've sped this up a little bit while I add the hair. I'm using 276, and towards the end of the clip, I'm using the Bordeaux, the 346. Now, in this section, I'm going to use the 276 to add the little hairs on the muzzle, like we did on the other side, except on the other side we used pink. So here we're going to use 276, which is buff, to add those short little hairs. Now on the outside edge, I'm using the 211 white to make them a little bit brighter right on that edge. I'm using white on the inside edge as well to make them nice and bright. It picks up the blue that's underneath. And I'm taking my time, as you can see, varying the direction, making sure that I get them just where I want them, and also paying close attention to my reference photo. Using my black to pull down the little dark areas down into the muzzle. I don't think they're really hairs. It's mostly the skin from the nose, but it helps to blend those two areas into each other. So I'm continuing to add the white. And now switching back to the 276. Still using the white and buff, but now I have the 263 Indian Red to add a bit of shadow and variation in color on the muzzle. I'm just using the point of it. It's very similar in color to the 411.5 in the Rembrandt. This is just a smaller pastel, so it's easy to get into these little places. Now I'm going to introduce brighter colors, so I'm going to use the 207 Chrome Yellow to add some bright yellow to that side of the muzzle. I like that. We've got lots and lots of colors in our box, so it would be good to use them. So I'm using the edge to add the brighter yellow on the outside edge. I'm adding more of the buff over the yellow. The yellow just adds a nice bright touch on that edge. And when I go over it with the white, it just gets brighter. They say you can't mix pastel, but if you add one color over the other, you can get a nice effect. They will blend visually. Now we're going to add another color to the mix. This is 296 Salmon. I love this color. It's not really an orange, but kind of. It's more on the pinky side, hence its name, Salmon. And so I'm adding hairs with that. It adds a lot of brightness and color. And it will use it in the mane as well. If we have a color, I hardly ever just use it in one place. I like to use it in more than one place. Now I'm adding it to the side of the muzzle, and you can see it just really adds a lot to that by adding that additional color. And we're going to use it in quite a few places around the face to just add a little more color, because this is a colorful, fun painting. I'm once again adding more color with the 411.5, and I'm going to darken the dark areas on the left side of the lion's face. After I finish adding that color, we still need to go darker in the shadows. So this is red violet, that I'm using at the top. So you could use your Bordeaux, or if you had an Art Spectrum Red Violet, you could use that, or you could use a Holbein Red Violet. So I'm just darkening that down, and then I'm going to add blue, the 508.5 dark blue over that. I'm just going to, shadows aren't quite dark enough for me. And we need to get them darker before we add more color. Now I'm using my 700.5 Rembrandt black to go a little darker with this. Just adding a little over the blue and the red violet, and it's going to make it even a little darker. Now I'm liking the way that looks. And you'll see me rub my painting with my fingers, and I'm just kind of rubbing the pastel into the paper. I just love this paper. It's soft. Now I'm using the a little piece of the Bordeaux. That kind of, since it's harder than the black, it will push in that black color into the velour paper. Now we're going to add another color. This is Giraud. I love Giraud pastels. They're very nice. And this is Giraud 376. It's a brown madder, but it's very dark. And now I have the 411.5 in my hand. But just before that, I had the Giraud. So I'm going to make that dark, dark area there. It has a slight reddy tint to it, and it helps to darken it down. And we're going to use that for the darkest areas on this painting. If you don't have that, you can use 353 Cordovan, or you can use Art Spectrum in 517. But I like the Giraud. You can see that color is really, there's nothing like it. So I'm using the Giraud for these darkest of shadows, right where the mane meets the lion's face. And then I'm using my Rembrandt 411.5 to kind of blend that together. And this is the Cordovan 353 to define the shadow a little bit. Here I'm using my 353 Cordovan to darken under the lion's eye a little bit before I add the lighter hairs that are there. I'm going to add a little above the eye as well. And now I'm just fine-tuning the values, making things darker, or adding a little more color using the same pastels we've used before. This is the dark blue. And here I'm adding a little bit of 229 black under the eye, just a little bit, make it a little bit darker before I add the light colors. In this area, I'm using my dark blue, my 508.8, and also my 570.5 phthalo blue. I'm just darkening this and using a little bit of the red violet to get this area very dark so that we can add some hair down here. I'm going to use a little bit of 700.5 black to get it super dark just up next to the face. I don't want to use it all over, but we need a little bit just to darken it. And now, since we have so many layers of pastel on the paper, you can see how soft and velvety it looks, which is one reason I love velour paper, especially for animals. And now I have a 353 smaller piece, and I'm going to use the edge and I'm going to use the end to darken this area a little bit. And here I'm using the end of my 229 black to go over this area and make it just a little bit darker. Because I've added so many colors there, it gives a very nice complex darkness. Now this is 263. I'm using the end of it, the Indian red, to add a little more color there. Now we're going to add some light hairs. This is 276, and I'm going to add those hairs that are light, that are underneath the eye. Now I'm adding a little white to make it just a little bit brighter in areas. So this is a 211 NuPastel white. Now I'm turning my hand so I can angle these hair in the right direction as it curves around the eye. Now, if you need to turn your picture around to do this, then please do. Just change the angle of your picture. Now I'm using my black to pull down little black hairs down into the white hairs to help it blend together. It helps that eye look like it's part of the surrounding area. Continuing to add the hair down underneath the eye, lighter, longer strokes using the 276 and then using the 207 yellow as well. Now I'm using a charcoal pencil to add some longer dark lines. This works well too. It's not as dark as the black, but it is a finer, thinner line. So take advantage of your charcoal pencil too. I'm using the salmon again, 296 salmon. I really like this color. It's very nice. Shows up well. It's a nice middle tone to kind of bridge the gap between the really light 276 that we used and the base color of the lion's skin. So you need to keep that in mind when choosing your colors. You want to have an equal range of darks, lights, and midtones. And the salmon works well for blending those two areas together. I like it quite a lot. Added a few more darks, and now I'm going to use the 276 to add these very light hairs right on the edge of the lion's face. They're longer hairs and they're lighter. So we're going to use the 276. I'm adding a little 211 white on top of that, 276. Couple of additional white hairs. Just, I like the way that looks. It's a nice variation of color. Finishing up these hair with the white, just I'm using real light touch, just barely touching the paper to add some white. And a little bit of black, a little dark. I'm using my white charcoal pencil to get a couple of sharp hairs there. I'm switching back to my Salmon 296 NuPastel to finish adding some hair up into that forehead area. I have 411.5 to add some medium value tone up into this area, just using the edge of it. And a little bit of 276 up there as well. And we need a few more dark hairs, so I'm going to use my black for that. And I'm going to use my 305 Spruce Blue, just the edge of that, to add some dark blue hair right in the center of the forehead there. We're adding the final hairs to the forehead now, using 276, and this is 233 Raw Sienna. Making sure to follow the direction that the hairs grow. Now we're going to start adding the hair down at the bottom. So we're going to use a combination of things. This is 296 salmon. And we're just drawing long hairs. This is the 266 pale vermilion we used in the eye. So we're going to use that. This is the yellow, the 207 yellow that we use. We're going to be using all of our colors that we've used previously to add a combination of hairs down into this bottom dark area that we spent so much time putting in. So just use whatever color you want to and draw long curvy strokes. So we're using 233, 296, 266, and our 207 yellow. So I'm using all the colors in my box just about and just putting these in. So I've sped this up a little bit for you. I add back in darks if I need them, or if it gets to be too bright, I can go over it with my 508.5 blue and kind of push it into the background. I'm using the edges of my Rembrandts as well as my 263 Indian red, all of the different colors. Overlapping, just have a good time with it. And I'm going to use my white 211 to kind of add a little more to the hair around the edge of the face. So we're just finishing up the face and setting the stage to do our mane in the next video. So you can see I'm using the 211.5, the 411.5, I'm sorry, 231.5. Just having a good time with it. So now the last thing I'm going to do is to add the whiskers. And remember, I took my white charcoal pencil and I sanded it on both sides to make it a chisel, and I'm drawing these lines out. I'm pressing fairly hard and it's one continuous line. That's the way you get the best look. So just take a deep breath and go for it. Using my black charcoal pencil to add a couple of black whiskers. So we finished the face. Join me in part 3 and we'll add the mane to our lion. See you then.